Welcome to today's video for Destination Unknown. Today I wanted to talk about reversals. Reversals are a very confusing subject when you're a beginning tarot reader. I know when I first began, they were a big, daunting subject. And to use the same analogy that we've used before here on the podcast and on the channel, we've talked about learning tarot is a little bit like going to a party and walking into a room and meeting 78 people who are also at the party, and you really can't get a grasp on who they all are in an instant. Some of them might come forward right away and be more striking. Some of them you might get to know a little bit better. Some of them you feel like you just don't understand at all. To continue the same analogy, when we're using a reversal, it's like meeting those same 78 people and then also having to know their good and their bad sides, what they're like when they're a little bit off that day. So maybe it's a different side of the same personality, and that's kind of the way a reversal works for the cards, at least in my opinion. So today, here's a few ideas about learning reversals. And the first thing that I would encourage you is when you're learning reversals, if it's confusing at the beginning, especially if you're new to tarot, don't even think about adding reversals, is my primary advice. And the reason for that is just to go back to the analogy. It's so confusing, it's so daunting to really get to understand the first primary 78 cards and what they mean, how those meanings can be a little bit different from day to day. The reversals take it in a different direction. And one of the ideas that I always like when I explain a reversal to someone I'm reading for, I say that if you imagine a reading is like the stream. So if we're going downstream, there's the current of the stream, and we see the energy of the stream and the energy moving along in the cards. But if we see a reversal, it's like something about that current has now stopped or changed or has redirected itself. So the energy form is there, but something about it has changed. So if we're a stream, it might have gotten deeper. And so it might be internalized. It might be that it's been redirected into a whole entire new direction. Or it might literally be that there's a blockage that's stopping the current from moving forward. And all three of those ideas apply to reversals. It can be something that's either internalized, something that is more about your external world, but is being redirected in a way that you didn't necessarily anticipate. Or like we said, you're being blocked from this energy form. So reversals aren't bad. A lot of times people dread them because they think they're adding bad news into their readings. That's not true. And we know that when we look at some of the cards for today. I've pulled a few cards to talk about those ideas of how would the reversal apply. And so if we start with the idea of, oh my gosh, reversals are bad, well, here I've brought out three cards that are traditionally associated with difficult times. Heartache, hardship, and betrayals are definitely seen in more than one way with these cards. So these are cards that when they're upright, they are speaking to a very difficult and negative connection or context in a reading. But as it's seen, when you reverse those cards, it definitely shows itself to me that when you look at the swords in particular, the swords are imagined as falling back out. So it's as if everything that is embedded in there when that's upright is now moving in a new direction. So if you've been stuck in an area of heartache and betrayal and sorrow and you can't see anything in your life except this, and it's a mentality you've been locked into, then a reversal of this acknowledges this pain, but it may say it's time for this to now move forward. You have learned all the lessons the card has given us. The blockage that this was is now ready to be released. So in many ways, the reversal can be just a different way of interpreting the cards, right? Okay, what do you mean, Alyssa? More. So those were some of the negative cards, or what we might think of cards that have a negative connotation. And here are cards that we think of as having a positive connotation, the Sun card and the Ten of Cups. And these are cards that, as they can tell, they show the happy family and emotional fulfillment. And then the Sun card is kind of the ultimate expression of that on the majors level. It's an expression of purity, goodness, wholeness, wholesomeness. These cards are interesting when they're reversed. When you follow a traditional reversal, if you see a Ten of Cups reversed, it may mean that what you see on the surface of this happy family image is just that. It's only on the surface. And if you scratch the surface, it's pretty dysfunctional. The upside down would definitely, the reversal would indicate that. But there are some positive ones, like the Sun. The Sun is considered so supremely positive of a card and of its message that even when it's reversed, you can't really take away or negate the positivity that the card expresses. But one way, and I believe this might have come from Rachel Pollack, it's been a long time ago that I remember coming across this, and it always made sense to me. They said that when the card itself is reversed, it's almost like the sun and a cloudy day. So you may not recognize all of that positivity and blessings that are coming through because the clouds that are inside yourself, your life, your mentality are blocking you from seeing or receiving the gifts that are there when it's upright. So that's kind of a different way to think about a reversal also, that it's so supremely good, it can't necessarily be shifted out of that. Are there any that are so supremely bad that we can't shift them out? No, not really. Nothing comes to mind. The Death and the Devil card, if you get stuck in the Death card and that's a reversal, it can mean someone is stuck in the grieving process and they're unable to actually put this in the ground and move on. That might be a metaphor or it might be literal if they are stuck in a pattern of grieving because it has been an actual loss. It may be a perceived loss or an internalized loss. But that's ways that you can definitely look at it differently from that. So the Death card, you're getting stuck there. Another way I've read the Death card reversed is almost the image of the zombie. So the Walking Dead. Instead of taking this issue and putting it in the ground and letting it die and go, this zombie is following you in your life and refusing to accept the change. That's a different way of looking at it. Okay, moving forward. Again, we also talked about cards that might just be a little bit different as far as redirecting the energy. You definitely see that the energy itself is still there, but perhaps blocked with the Sun card. Here we have the Ace of Pentacles. Aces talk about seeds. That's the word I always associate with the ace. And to use that analogy, if the ace itself becomes reversed, there's something about this seed, this potential that we're reading about, that is not being nurtured. So it's almost as if the seed has been cast upon unfertile ground. And the idea, the seed itself is fine. The idea is great. Whatever that represented, it's just not being met with the conditions for it to flourish and grow. That would be one way to look at a reversal on an ace, is that it doesn't have the energy it needs to continue to develop into its potential. Here I've pulled a couple different cards to also talk about for reversals. So we have the Hanged Man and we have the Hermit. So these are two very solitary figures in the majors themselves. And when you see the Hermit upright definitely tells of a time of solitude and usually time spent looking for understanding, greater wisdom, bringing wisdom down from above to below. But that wisdom in and of itself does nothing if all the person who has gathered that wisdom stays in the cave and never comes down off the mountain to share it again with humanity. And that's one of the reasons we see this card so early. It's a 9. It's early on in the 22 of the cards that are the majors. So when we see the Hermit reversed, we might be seeing the energy redirected, that solitude is now coming to an end, and that you are ready, or this person is ready to come down from their solitude off the mountain and give back some of what they have gained during their time alone. You might also say that the Hermit reversed is someone who has now been alone so long they've become dysfunctionally alone. Unabomber would be an exact or an extreme example of that. But the idea that the hermitage has now caused detriment to the personality, that might also be a Hermit reversed card. So when you're dealing with the Hanged Man, the Hanged Man itself is not a card expressing death by hanging. It is a card that expresses sacrifice, and it's usually considered as a willing sacrifice. In other words, he put himself into this unlikely position, but not because he simply wanted to be a martyr. It was to also gain greater wisdom, similar to the Hermit. So if we see this reversed, it's kind of interesting that now we see kind of, I believe someone once long called him a Michael Flatley Riverdance looking fella when he's reversed. And so he's ready to, one way to read the reversal is he's ready to come down off that world tree, is the idea. The tree that he suspended himself, the suspension of forward movement in his life that he chose, he's ready to now move forward again. The time of sacrifice is complete. And so that would be one way to, and so he's ready to jump down the position that he's put himself in to tie his hands. He's now ready to untie his own hands in that way. That would be one way of looking at it. It could also be a dysfunctional sacrifice. So if we have the reversal, someone has put themselves in a position of extreme sacrifice. They think it's for their highest good or the best of the situation, but it's not. And they're the last ones to seem to be able to understand that. That would also be another way to take a look at the reversal on a card like this. Last one I want to talk about are court cards. Court cards for me are so tricky. To this day, even as an experienced reader, I find them very challenging. And so one of the things that's challenging, here I just pulled the Queen of Pentacles. When she's upright, she represents a dynamic figure, one who is in manifestation, because Pentacles is about the materialization and the material realm. So this is someone who has a lot of influence in the world of material reality. She might be very wealthy because it's associated with coins and wealth. And she's obviously in a position of power, being the queen, but she's not a closed power form the way the king is. She's dynamic, she's changing, she takes on new ideas in her path. So if that's her when she's upright, when we see the reversal, what would that signify? Some of those qualities that we talked about when she was upright might now be working against her, or might now have created a more dysfunctional personality. The Queen of Pentacles might also be someone who is money hungry and power hungry, power rich. If they have those kind of driving ambitions that shut out their connections with others, that dysfunctional quality to their materialism, so that they don't have necessarily connection with fellow man, that would definitely be another way of expressing the reversal. The hardest part for me when dealing with the court cards is trying to determine in this reading, do they point outward or inward? Meaning, do they point out to another person who's involved in this? A Queen of Pentacles reverse might be a dysfunctional mother-in-law in this situation who's pulling all the strings on our mortgage. That would be the material aspect kind of coming through. That would be pointing outward. But if I'm the one who's being too stingy and I'm denying myself this opportunity from a perceived lack of funds, but really the funds are there, I just am afraid to go for it, that would be a way that the Queen of Pentacles message is still a reversed message, but it's pointing inward. It's pointing to the person either for yourself or the one you're reading for. So that makes it tricky. Trying to determine these, to me, are the hardest to understand because there's something about their personalities, either ours or theirs, that have now gotten even trickier instead of just the concepts that we were dealing with in some of the other cards. Well, I hope this gives you some great ideas as far as how reversals work, what they are about, and some of the ways that you can interpret a reversal. One thing I would mention before we close, a great way to begin reversals, if you decide you want to throw them out completely, and I did for years, you are empowered to do so. You will know when it's time to start using your reversals again. You just will. You'll get to the point where you feel like your deck is just being limited. It can't speak to you as fully as it wants to, or you feel like you're missing the big picture somehow. That feeling comes to you, but after time. And so if you're ready to start adding reversals, but you're not ready to start interpreting every single one like Alyssa was just doing, one way to do it is to simply take the message itself of the card, and if it's reversed, it applies to the internal realm. So that's the first way that I read reversals. Either I was being a hermit in my outside world, or internally I was being a hermit with how my mental, my emotional, how I was reaching out with others in that way. So that would be a way to incorporate the reversal early on if you want to try, but you're just not ready for that whole influx of information that comes from learning the reversals that are unique to each card. Thanks again for joining me today, and have a great day. Go forward and keep listening.